Welcome to OGR's Digital Dialogue Series. I'm Mark McSweeney, the Interim Executive Director and CEO of OGR, and I'll be your MC today. OGR has put together this series of education sessions to help you recover from COVID-19 and move forward into a new future. Today's session, Pivot and Prevail, how to craft and share a message when margins are tight, funerals aren't valued, and social distancing is the norm, will give you practical tips for adjusting your marketing messaging and building better connections with your community. We're excited to have Alex McCracken of Funeral Innovations with us today to facilitate this conversation. Alex is the VP of Sales for Funeral Innovations. He's spoken at both state and national funeral service associations on customer relationships, technology, funeral service, and marketing. If during today's sessions you have questions for Alex, please use the question box to send in questions or comments, and we'll be sure to get those answered as quickly as we possibly can. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I'm Alex McCracken with Funeral Innovations, and today I want to talk to you about disruption in the marketplace and how we can pivot and prevail over some of those things that are happening, right? So you always want to be ready when some type of disruption happens, because if not, you can get left behind in the dust, right? And we don't want that. We want to be a very solid foundation and being adapting to some of the new things coming on. And today what we're going to talk about is how to do that, how to craft a message when your margins are tight, how to make sure that your funerals are valued with the community, especially when social distancing is the norm. And we're not really sure we're going to make it out of this pandemic and what the things will be like during, throughout, and after. So let's look at some common examples of disruption, what's happened, right? So we all know the battle between Netflix and Blockbuster. And you know, I'm not sure if a lot of people realize this, but Netflix actually started in 1997. Blockbuster went bankrupt in 2010. So there was a good 13 years that Blockbuster had to respond to Netflix where they didn't. They saw Netflix coming in, and by the time that they saw that disruption, it was too late and really affected their business and ultimately made them bankrupt. Another common example here is Uber in New York City, okay, taxis. So the really interesting thing is Uber just didn't disrupt taxis and decrease demand. They actually really influenced the pricing of things that are called medallions here. So if you're not familiar, New York City cabs have these things called medallions, and medallions are something that actually New York City taxi drivers bank their retirement on. They can cost upwards of $1 million to get one of these medallions. Well, when Uber came in 2011, it was only 3 years later that the price of a New York City taxi medallion absolutely plummeted. They were still in business, but people's retirements went completely out of the window because they couldn't sell that medallion to the next generation of taxi drivers for New York. And this was a disruption that they didn't see. In fact, if you're familiar with this, you may have even heard about how New York City taxi drivers blocked the roadways because they were trying to protest Uber, which ended up having more people use Uber. So we want to think about this in terms of disruption and that it might not just be you go bankrupt, it could decrease the value of your business. We don't want that to happen. So disruption is always happening, right? And especially now with this pandemic, we're seeing even more disruption all over the place. We really want to respond to that disruption and keep an eye on it on how to respond to that disruption. So we're seeing a lot of changes with this, right? Social distancing, limits on group sizes going up and going down, and nothing's consistent. People are working from home. People don't want to meet face to face. People are alternating shifts within the funeral home. And it's really the way we're doing business now is completely different, right? And this has actually caused a lot of very quick disruptions that we need to respond to. So one of my favorite examples of a disruption that happened and the way a company handled that is Eversong, okay? So Eversong is actually a company who creates all the music that you hear when you're in grocery stores. So as you're walking around shopping for your whole wheat bread and you hear that music, It's actually done purposefully by a company called Eversong. So much so that they even measure the beats per minute and try to slow you down to make sure you stay in a grocery store longer. Very interesting dynamic at this company. But when the pandemic hit, they had a complete disruption. They actually had to go to all of their stores, mainly Kroger's and King Soopers, and pull out that music and the songs that weren't appropriate for the pandemic. Examples of that were Hot Blooded by Foreigner, Doctor Doctor Give Me the News by Robert Palmer. You may have heard of Rockin' Pneumonia, The Boogie Woogie Flu by Johnny Rivers. These are all songs that had to be removed from those, and an example of a very quick disruption to as not to offend anybody in these marketplaces. But here's the thing, it's not just grocery stores and the songs that are coming out into the grocery stores. Funeral homes are seeing this disruption too. And in order to stay on top of that, funeral homes have had to respond very quickly to be able to respond to that. So one of the big things that's happened with this and the consumers and the community members that you're trying to reach is that they are at home now, right? So they're at home on their couch. They may have a job or they may not. If they do have a job, they still have to work from home. So we're seeing a lot more people now that they're at home, not going out and attending events or getting information from you in a person to person. You know, generally when, let's say you had a service, you might be able to show how good of the quality of service is that you have for all the people who attend a service. But if nobody's coming, if you only have 10 people there, how do you do that? We need to now think about other ways to reach people in your community when they are at home and they're spending their time online, and what we need to do about that. So there's a lot of ways that we can reach these people, right? Facebook is obviously a very big one. Facebook numbers have actually been increasing in terms of the amount of time people are spending on their platform since the pandemic hit. YouTube, another great way to reach people and where people are spending their time. The websites, so people are on websites, email. So you got to think about these different ways that now people are consuming information when they're at home. Your old handout brochure is not going to work anymore, right? Because nobody's going to come into your funeral home to get that. So let's look at a little bit more into Facebook, as Facebook is one of the most used social media platforms and where people are spending a lot of time. So organic reach is sinking, right? So this is when you put up a Facebook post, just a normal post on your Facebook page, it's reaching less and less people. That's because there's increased competition from other companies out there, right? So Nike, Oreo, even Amazon, Home Depot, these very large companies are spending millions of dollars with Facebook to be able to reach the same community members that you're trying to reach. So when you put up a individual post, only 5% or less of your followers actually see that post. Okay. So if we want to think about how do we reach people now during this pandemic who are online, we need to realize that organic reach is sinking and it's not hitting as many people. If you have 100 followers or 100 fans, less than 5% or 5 of those people will ever even see that post, let alone interact with it. Exceptions to this are getting early engagement, so having a message that really resonates with people or something that they can relate to. Another example of this might be people sharing it very early. So if you don't get that very early interaction, your reach is very much going to sink. So what do we do with that? Facebook ads. Facebook ads are the way that we can actually now go and actively reach people in the community. Facebook ads are, something like boosting a post. That's a great way for people to see a post if they're not seeing it organically. But there's actually technically called Facebook ads. And these are things that run, and you probably see them all the time when you're going through Facebook and you don't ever realize it if you are on Facebook. But they have that little button on the bottom that has some call to action, whether that's sign up or download or learn more, get info. When you see that little button on it, you know that's a Facebook ad when you see it in your newsfeed. But you as a funeral home can use this to reach more people in your community and have a lot more success. It really takes your dollar a lot further using Facebook ads than spending your time making a post, putting it on your Facebook page, and having very little people see it. It's worth it to put as little as $5 just to get that ad out to more people. So one of the things you can do is you can boost, right? Boosting is great for brand awareness, right? So this is a way that you can get people to actually see a post, not necessarily interact with it, but you want people to just see it, right? This is something to get your name, your message, your logo out there so people can see it. It's a great thing for brand awareness, right? But you want to target people in your community with this, boost that post. And this is where you get a lot more engagement, comments, shares, likes, any type of reaction to the post. You can also target more people in your community, right? So there's really hyper targeting that's available within Facebook. So don't think about this as if you're in San Diego that you're going to be reaching people in Vermont. We want to go into Facebook and really hyper target people. That includes geographically where they are. So, if they're within 5-mile service area, 10-mile, whatever it is. But there's also ways to find the age group that you might want to target. So whether that's, a pre-need message that maybe you want to do 45 to 65, or maybe it's, a larger audience where you're just doing more, high level education and reaching. But you don't want to waste your ad budget on the wrong people. So it's important to identify the reach of people that you want to do when you're trying to reach these people online. An interesting stat is actually 92 people are reached for every dollar spent. When the pandemic broke out in March, an interesting thing happened is a lot of people actually moved off of the platform to conserve revenue, to conserve their expenses, which actually means that the number of people you could reach for a dollar went up. So during March, April, even into May, we were seeing a lot more people being reached on a dollar that was going a lot further. This is a great opportunity for you to capitalize on when things are changing. You don't want to pull out all of your marketing resources during, something like this, some type of big disruption. It's really time for you to double down and get, if you have the expenses, to be able to use that to get your dollar further than normal. So one of the great ways that you can use this is by using lead forms, okay? So we'll talk a little bit about some of the topics that you might want to use for this in a second here. But lead forms are a great way to use Facebook to say, hey, I have some information I want to get out to you, to keep in touch, to educate you, but I want to do it and I want your contact information so I can get you that information, right? So let's say you do have a brochure that you normally had about grief support in your funeral home. You can now use that, get a digital copy of it, and put it up on Facebook to get that out to people. But you want to use a lead form, so when people see that, they can give their contact information, and then you can send them that resource that they've requested. Lead forms are great because Facebook automatically puts in the information of that user onto the lead form. And so, we're looking at Zach's information here. If Zach was on Facebook and saw this, all he has to do is click to get that information, and Facebook puts in this information for him. It makes it much easier for your community members to sign up and get that information without having to put in all their information. So let's talk about some of those resources that we can put out. Now, the resources that we want to put out really have to be specific to what type of message we can do during a pandemic. I'll show you what those are here in a second, but the educational resources are great ways to get that information out and educate people on the value of the different services you provide, right? So Living Will is a very classic one. This is a great one to educate people on just end of life plans, what they need to do with that, tying in some of the funeral plans with that. But if you have these resources, these are the types of things you want to put out on Facebook. Veterans benefits, another great one. Cemetery guides. I would caution to do a lot of pre-planning. The pre-planning content has, that's a little bit further what we consider down in the funnel. And when people see that type of information, they're a little bit more sensitive around that at this time because they think you're trying to sell something or maybe taking advantage of that situation. But we'll talk about that here in a second about those topics that are best for you. But any of this information here, we want to email it over. There's a big reason that we want to email this over. Facebook inherently is a very public sector, right? It's a public forum. When you're on Facebook, people, we liken it more to a bar, if y'all can remember what those are. But bars are a place where people are, you're having very short, quick conversations. It's loud. There's a lot of distractions. You kind of got to get to the point of what you're trying to say. It's not like an intimate situation like sitting in a restaurant and having a one-on-one conversation where you can get deeper into conversation. So when you think about the type of stuff you want to put on Facebook, remember it's a public forum. Not only do we need to have the messages a lot shorter and sweeter that hit on the individual points you want to make, but we also need to realize that because it's public, you're going to have less people who really fully interact and engage with that material because it's public. Especially something that's taboo, like talking about death for a lot of people in your community. If we can move that conversation to a more private forum like email, it's a lot easier to have them open up, engage, interact, and learn more information. So remember, Facebook, very high level. What we want to talk about are points, public forum. Email is a great way to take that public information, put it in a more private forum, and have more engagement. That's why we always say you want to have a lot more information that you deliver via email than you do via Facebook. You don't want to have a Facebook with a message or ad with a ton of information on it. So think about that when you're putting together and how you structure reaching people on Facebook during this pandemic and taking advantage of more people being on Facebook. So a great place to actually create these lead magnets or these resources, one of them is Fiverr. Fiverr is a great website for you to go on and unload a bunch of information. So if you are the authority on, the cremation process, go on to Fiverr and find somebody for, very cheap that will put together a resource for you to put online. They make very professional resources. The whole idea from Fiverr actually came from, it used to be where you could just take a $5 bill and say, all right, for $5, what would you do? So you could put up a job and say, hey, I want somebody to click on this button 700 times for $5. And if somebody wants to do it for $5, they'll do it. But now it's kind of grown into this place where you can go on and put any type of job on there and people would create resources. But this is a great thing. If you don't have those resources in-house, to be able for you to be able to go on and have those resources made for you. I would say another place that you can get these lead magnets or these resources are from your pre-need company. If you work with them, they might have it, a third-party marketer. Another place might be from your insurance company. A lot of times they have resources. Now, I would ask them if they've used those resources recently in a pandemic and what the response was to those. Because as we'll see here shortly, you want to make sure that your information that you're putting out there is appropriate for the time. So not sure why that's not showing up. Let's see if it does now. So I'm not sure why my ads aren't showing up here on this, but one of the things you want to realize is when you are putting out your ads, you need to be very sensitive in the topics that you're putting out there, right? So let's look at some of the high-level points about the type of content you want to put out there. So your content, with the ads that you're going to put out, need to be sensitive and aware, okay? What do I mean by sensitive? You need to be understanding of the situation that some people are scared, some people think it's, it's not a big deal. So you have different sides of this. So you don't want to play to either side. You want to play in the middle of being sensitive to everybody's situation, okay? I think everybody in this profession is very used to being sensitive and not using some type of hard-hitting message. What do I say about that is, any type of message that you're using to maybe exploit what's going on in the pandemic, it would not be good. So saying, hey, are you scared about what's going on in the pandemic? Well, contact us about getting your funeral arrangements in place just in case. That would be an extremely insensitive message that you wouldn't want to put out there. And that's also being aware. You need to be aware of what's going on in your community. if there are cases, if there have been deaths, what is going on there, and really be sensitive and aware of what's going on in your individual location. You want to have a softer message, okay? So think about the verbs and the words that you're using. Those soft messages need to be a lot more comforting, a lot less hard. Think about how you're positioning your message as well with that. So make it very soft. You also want to have peaceful images, right? So your imagery needs to be a lot more soft and soothing, lighter colors, not big, dark, bold colors. There's a lot that can go into the images you need to put out to be sensitive during this time. So make sure they're peaceful, hopeful, brighter colors, things like that. You also want your ads to be more resourceful, okay? So you want to be providing information and resources to these people. You don't want this to be a time where you're taking and asking for stuff. You're saying, hey, I have something for you that I think will be valuable and resourceful for you during this time. Think about what your community members might be going through right now, right? How is grief being handled differently during the pandemic when they can't have an entire service and family members and friends there to support them? Okay, think about what they might need. How do you handle grief differently when you don't have that, right? How are people doing different services now, right? Those are the types of resources that people might have questions, whether they realize it or not, that you can use your ads to reach out to people and actively inform them on the ways that you're doing business now and the options that they have now. So that's being resourceful. And you also want to have it focus on the family and the community, okay? So what do I mean by this? This means that your message shouldn't be about yourself. If you are talking about what you're doing, put it with a spin on how you're helping the community. You always want to be talking about them. They're the focus of your marketing, not yourself, okay? So if you're talking about, hey, what type of services do we offer? A great way to say that you're offering during the pandemic, a great way to say that would be, a lot of people in the community are asking how we might be able to help them now that the pandemic has reached our community and what they can do. Here's what we're doing for other families to help them through this time. You hear how we keep talking about family, community in that type of message. That's how you want to spend this. You don't want to go out there and be like, hey, here's the new services we're having for the pandemic, right? That's too much talking about yourself. Focus on the community, the family, and how you're helping them. This is obviously very important during a pandemic, but it's important really all the time. So you want to make sure that you're always having that type of focus whenever you're doing your marketing. So content ideas. Let's look at some of these. Some of the content ideas are that you can use when you're reaching out to people are updates about funeral services. So what are you doing specifically to help people through COVID-19, and what are you doing with your services? So that means what you're doing for families who have lost a loved one, what you're doing to support family, community members to support that family, different creative new things that people are asking for, and how you can handle that. Fact-based information about state and local restrictions. Guys, this is very important to think about the fact-based stuff. Do not put any type of opinion or some type of subjective approach to it. You want to talk about the facts. The governor has done X. The mayor has done X. Not saying, hey, the mayor's done this and we don't like this or think this, or like this is going to be a burden on us. You need to be talking about the facts of it and the factual things about how you're responding to that. Religious and inspirational content. This is great. People are looking for hope and need to understand how to get through that. If you give them some of the ideas about here's what you need to be looking forward to, or how to just manage the stress of this situation, we can use that type of content to reach people better there. Stress relief tips. So this is a great one. If people are experiencing stress, what can we do about it, right? This is mental things, mental stress. So how do we alleviate mental stress? It can also be physical stress. If people are locked up, what do they need to do, right? Do they need to go out and exercise more? How do they do that, right? Think about ways that people can relieve stress. A lot of times I tell funeral homes that are putting out content themselves to respond on a day-to-day basis, or especially with regards to a pandemic. What type of how do they find that information? You can actually set up alerts in Google. If you just Google Alerts, where it will comb the web and look for different articles or topics based upon the search terms that you put in. So you can actually put those search terms in and find multiple ways to pull articles down and actually post those on your Facebook and just keep people with ideas on how to relieve their stress. Grieving the loss of a loved one, right? This is a great way to talk about how people can grieve, right? What's the new way of grieving? And I'm not just talking about the families you've served, I'm talking about how the community members can also help grieving families. What can they do, right? Can they go and send a meal to that family, right? Or maybe send a card to them. There's multiple different ways that you can tell your community support the families who are grieving. Non-COVID-19 content. I can't stress this enough. People still want to think about the way things should be. People are getting inundated with COVID-19 stuff, so we don't want to have that be everything you do. The same stuff that you should be posting. Any type of stuff about living wills, right? Estate planning, any of the stuff, the educational things that you should and have been doing, continue to do that. I would shy away from doing things about the pre-planning hard stuff. So no pre-planning campaigns. Nothing at the bottom of the funnel type messaging. I would stay away from that type of stuff as well. Tips on coping with isolation. This kind of goes back in the stress relief, but isolation is a separate matter. So how do we teach people about how to cope with isolation, being alone, what to do, how to reach out to people, make sure you call family and friends, things like that. There's a lot of ways that people can cope with isolation. We need to think about that. Navigating hospice situations. This is a big one, right? So what can people do to understand about what to do with a hospice, when to move people in, or not be scared about an outbreak at a hospice, right? A lot of funeral homes that are doing this well are partnering up with their local hospice to put out content and other information there. So one of the ways that we can think about this type of outreach is by doing what's called lifetime marketing. So this lifetime marketing is a framework on how we can deliver messages to people depending on where they are in their life, right? We need to think about all of these in terms of the topics we just covered about and changing them for a pandemic. But I want to present you an idea about how to reach people throughout their lifetime with different messages, okay? We need to change the overall topic for something that's going on with a lot of disruption like we're seeing now. But the core of how we reach people with different messages throughout their lifetime is the same here. So this idea of lifetime marketing is providing personalized and educational communication throughout somebody's life. And we can do that in a variety of ways. We want to use a lot of different forms of outreach because not everyone's on Facebook, not everyone's on email, not everyone reads their physical mail. So let's break this down a little bit and how we can look through this lifetime marketing. So first interaction with somebody might be on something like social media, right? Or maybe you had a service with them, but you have the first interaction with somebody in your community. At that point, that's where we want to do more educational marketing type of stuff. So stuff where we can actually start that high level conversation, educating them on the different services and the value of those services that you provide. Then let's say they have a family death. The type of marketing and information we want to deliver to them after they have a death in the family is going to be different. This is where we want to provide more at-need information. How do I carry on from when a death happens to when a service happens, right? This is a great thing that funeral directors are very proficient in doing. You've had a death, how do I get you to the service and even beyond that, okay? But don't think that can't also be used in your marketing materials. A lot of times your competitors in a market are providing none of these resources. So even if a family went to one of your competitors, you can still provide them this information and help them where your competitor is doing nothing to help that family along. So there's definitely information that you can put out to families you're serving and families that another funeral home is serving to help them through that at-need situation. And then, of course, after a service, aftercare, very different messaging that we want to put out with people after a service through this aftercare. Okay, so that information is going to be going out and helping people along. Grief support, collecting reviews, what to do with your online accounts, like how do I close out a Facebook account, or who needs death certificates. Think about that as your marketing resources. Yeah, that's a completely different type of message that you want to provide after a service. And then maybe you have an event attendance. This event attendance doesn't have to be physical. It can be a virtual one that you get people in. But after an event, you want to have a different type of messaging. This is a sales follow-up, but it can also be a marketing type of follow-up there and how you deliver. Pre-need sales, same thing. Not a lot of funeral homes are doing this, but you need to think about the aftercare you can provide after a pre-need situation. And then let's say that this person has passed away. Well, now there's a whole new set of people you can start this lifetime marketing with, new first interactions. So you can see how it really branches out from this. Let's look at a quick few examples of these. So educational posts, right? So how do we reach out to people with these educational posts? What are some examples here? Maybe unique funeral options or 7 ways to stay positive during a crisis. This is a great one to respond to when this disruption that we're seeing is occurring right now. Or how to participate in a digital funeral. You can see these are very pertinent to the times because it's still educational, but we're also responding and being sensitive and aware of the current situation that your community members are experiencing. So in an at-need situation, right, there's a different type of resources we want to provide here. So getting the worst call of your life. I can't tell you how many people of all ages, especially millennials, who don't even know what to do when a death occurs. Do you call the police first? Do you call a funeral home first? What age do you do that? What are the certain situations and circumstances, and who do you call, right? What is this process I'm expecting to go through, right? If you get a call and you go in and pick up a body at night, that family still needs to know what they need to do. This is a great time to send somebody the information on what they need to do in this at-need situation about that worst call of the life, or educating them on the different options that they might have when a death is imminent or somebody has passed away. So here are the options. If they didn't have a pre-arrangement, these are some options you can think about to make those decisions. So another one, aftercare, right? Different messaging that we want to put out there, right? Transitional care guide, right? So this is a great one. Having checklists or things that people need to handle after the death or after the service is a great thing to put into your aftercare. We don't want to just say, hey, thank you for using us and we appreciate you entrusting us our funeral home. Provide those resources. Focus on the family. Another one, aftercare, or in your aftercare is what to do with online accounts. This is one that a lot of families, especially today, are finding valuable. So here's what to do. Here's how to provide those resources and information on how to shut down things like your online accounts. Plenty of topics that you can do in aftercare beyond just the hey, we're thinking about you and hope you're doing okay. Okay. Sales follow-up. A lot of times you might have an event, whether that's traditionally physical events, but also doing virtual events like a Zoom meeting or something. We can also provide that a follow-up to that. Ask them how the event went. Ask them if they would like to come in and do a more personal consultation to learn about that. Definitely different message in your sales follow-up about how you can reach people. We generally recommend email or phone call for this type of marketing. All this follow-up, anytime somebody's interacting, you want to have these follow-ups. A lot of effective pre-need counselors will take people interacting with these different type of marketing materials and send out additional information saying, hey, I saw that you're looking at estate planning. Have you thought about making a living will? Let me send you this information Doing that via email and phone is a great way to follow up and kind of segue that conversation into a one-on-one conversation. These are all about handling that type of change that people are experiencing now and how they interact with businesses online. Great way to do that is by having this type of follow-up. Another place that you can put all these resources that often gets overlooked is on your website. A lot of people use their websites as a means just to sell flowers, okay? Your website shouldn't just be used for that. Your website should be used as a place for engagement and interaction, where people can come on there and find these types of resources of wherever they are in their lifetime. So with these different sections of lifetime marketing, let's think about those, put those resources easy to find and downloadable on your website, okay? Very effective way to use the traffic that you're getting on your website and also to increase traffic to your website. If you use those Facebook ads, and whether you want to use it as sending them an email to download them, you can even just point them back to your website. Now, your success on that is going to be a little bit less than if you had a direct download from Facebook, but you can also just send people back from social media over onto your website. So don't overlook your website in terms of the resource you're putting out there, how easily it is to navigate, and what other things you can do to engage people on your website beyond just getting them to go to an obit and purchasing flowers. In fact, using the obituaries, which is your most visited site or page on your website, is a place where you should be putting these resources out as well. You think about these as in-house ads, right? These are advertising some of the educational resources you have by putting them on your obituaries on a sidebar. So when people come there, we're not just saying, hey, look at the obituary and wave goodbye and then, you know, pat ourselves on the back that we got a website visitor. Let's actually be a little bit, more ambitious and think about, now that we got visitors to our website, now what? Well, resources and these, this educational information that you built can be put on your website to be able to reach those families, provide that resource to them, and deepen that relationship with them. These are really valuable to the families, and you should really think about that as you go through with it. And what you want to do though is you want to continue to stay in contact with these people. It's great that you're providing resources, but you also want to use landing pages to get people's contact information. So if people are interested in a thing, you can have an exchange of information, right? So let's not look at it as just a one and done. They download some information and wave goodbye. Let's say, hey, if you give me your contact information, I'll give you this information, and now you have somebody that you can follow up with. You can follow up with them with email newsletters. You can follow up with them on call with additional information on a personal email. There's multiple ways that, as long as you get their contact information, you're building a list of people that you can nurture, stay in touch with, and stay top of mind with, okay? So you want to offer this type of stuff on your website in exchange for their information. Landing pages are a great way to do that. So let's look at some other ways that people have been pivoting and being very successful during this disruption we're seeing. So one of them is video conferencing. If you're not familiar with Zoom, I don't know where you've been. It's been very popular and it's taken off with a lot of people using Zoom to actually reach out to people, not only for consult or at-need appointments, but also doing more pre-need appointments as well. We see a lot of funeral homes that are using this as a one-on-one to get pre-arrangements done. So a lot of times family members don't want you in the house. Well, we can set up this video conferencing via Zoom. There's all sorts of ones. I use Join Me. There is GoToWebinar. There's all sorts of them out there, all different pricing. A lot of people are familiar with Zoom though. That's why I bring that one up. But a way that we're starting to see more people do this now as well is also by doing more group presentations. Now, here's the thing about when you use video conferencing for group presentations, similar to what we're doing here, is there's not a lot of back and forth dialogue, okay? So what you wanna do is, if you're doing this with multiple people, think about a high level event. Maybe you partner with your local hospice and wanna do a joint Zoom presentation to people in your community. You run those Facebook ads, You get people who have ever showed interest in hospice to sign up and get them interested in these types of this type of content like hospice. And then you can retarget them because you've gotten their contact information and say, hey, I saw you had some questions about hospice and were interested in information there. Now you can set up a Zoom meeting, a conference. You and the local hospice rep can actually provide information, have a whole presentation. But here's the key, is at the end of that, since you're not having the conversations back and forth, follow up with those people individually. Okay, so reach back out to them and say, hi Jane, I saw that you attended the hospice webinar, was wondering what questions you had, can we answer anything else? Ask some questions, have a call to action, but schedule that one-on-one Zoom call after and see where you can go with that. So you need to know when you do a group presentation, there's no back and forth, in a more dialogue like you've been used to. It might take some getting used to, but I'm sure, we all realize that this is the time to pivot and prevail. So now's the time to try something new like that. Another one, text messaging. Text messaging has increased in popularity. As we all know, nobody is leaving their text messages unread. You go on there, I believe the latest stat I saw was 98% read rate on text messages. Use this to your advantage, right? If somebody does download some information, drop them a text from your cell and just say, hey, seeing if you had any other questions. I know a lot of funeral directors are already doing this with the any at-need family that comes in, but think about it for pre-need. Think about it even for your marketing. If you have time, resources, you have a marketing coordinator that can handle that type of stuff, think about how you can follow up with information via text message. Very powerful aftercare, but not just aftercare, for grief support. We see a lot of success with people using our text messaging capabilities for grief support because they prefer to receive that when they are busy doing something, as opposed to email, or maybe you're sitting down and you have to dedicate more time to going in and reading an email. One thing I wanted to mention on this is group chats. Okay, a lot of funeral homes are starting to do this with families, where they will take a number of people to that of a family, put them all in one group chain, and text message with them after an at-need situation. This is an easier way, since you can't meet the whole family in your funeral home. You can put them all in the same text chain, start asking questions, getting information, getting things solved, and they can actually have that dialogue on that group chat. So think about using text in that scenario as well. Great way to pivot on that. So some other examples of way that people are using this. One is hugs from home. I'm not sure who all's heard about this, but a lot of funeral homes are doing this now. Actually, Harold Funeral Home down in Austin really promotes this. The idea behind this is, since people cannot come in and into the funeral home and are not able to handle grief the way that they used to, they are helping facilitate that community response to the death of an individual. And what they do is they say, all right, if you're a community member, what we want you to do is to leave a message for the bereaved, and they take that message and they go and they write it on cards. And every single one of those responses, they give those cards to the family and say, here are all the people in the community who wrote you a message of support. And this has been widely successful. They've gotten so many positive comments about from the bereaved about how to handle that. Has been helping their grief, especially in today's age. Another one is live stream funerals. I know a lot of people are doing that now. There's a variety of ways to do that. You can use Facebook Live as a way to do that. You can use more private things like a Zoom. There's multiple ways. A lot of people are recording those and using different angles. You can get pretty cheap camera and tripod equipment from Amazon. I know a lot of funeral homes are still just using their iPhone, but we don't know how long this is going on. So it's great you made the first pivot. Let's continue to make a bigger pivot to facilitate this for a longer time, as we don't really know when this current disruption is really going to end. Another one is tribute balloons. This is a great one. So if you do have a big room or service room or facility where you have multiple chairs or pews or whatever it is that you have in your individual funeral homes, you can go on and anytime somebody leaves a tribute on an obituary or anywhere on your website, you can actually go and put up balloons. You can go one step further and, like the Hugs for Home, write a little message on those balloons. But a lot of people are doing this, even with the recorded, live stream funerals, is they'll put a balloon on each one of the seats that act as a person being there, right? So now the bereaved can be at the front, and they might only have 10 people at the service, but as they look around, they see all these balloons for support for their family. We've also heard people doing graveside condolences or car trains. What this is let's say you are doing a graveside service, you tell everyone that they can come, but they have to stay in their cars. And so what you do is you have an area right next to the road where cars can roll up, and all the family members in the car can say, whatever they want to the family, but they stay in the car. The bereaved stay, or the family stay on, the grass, and each car comes by. Now, this can take a while, but it is a great way to support your families and show that the community is still there even during this time of social distancing. Similar thing, people do a neighborhood parade of cars. So arranging a parade for people to go, drive their cars past the house of the bereaved on a certain day, honk their horn, wave, whatever it is, but just showing support in some other way than having a physical attendance. Virtual hugs, we talked about that already, actually. And then virtual candlelight service. So you can also do these on your online obituaries of lighting candles and showing support that way. So there's a lot of things, if you are being creative with your response and pivoting, that will set you apart from your competition because you are offering these services in very uncertain times. A lot of people are also picking up online arrangers, right? So let's also think about how to support your families and online. Do you have arrangement options where they can come on and do their arrangements online? Increasing the amount of gifts that you provide. So it's not just flowers we need to show support. There's a lot of ideas on that. If you're interested in that, feel free to email me. I'll show you multiple ways that you can support your families on that. Another thing that is relatively new is getting machines to do the work for you in terms of writing these cards. So there are actually companies now that make handwritten notes, but use a machine to do it. If you're interested in some of these company names, I have quite a few lists of those. But the way it works is you can actually submit all of your text to this company. That company will take all those different messages and write them with a pen using a machine like this. So you can actually get more work done by not having to physically write this and still send off a handwritten note to people. This has been extremely popular and saves you a ton of time. They can do hundreds, if not thousands. All the cards could say the same thing, or they can say something different. So you have a lot of options, and prices vary depending on how you want to do that with that. This is a great example of how you can use technology without really adopting the technology. It's another company who has taken all that technology and put it together, but you're just utilizing that on your behalf. So the idea here is that we want to pivot and prevail, right? We want to understand that there's a lot of change going on, and in order for us to stay ahead of the competition and stay up to date with what the community wants, you have to pivot, you have to stay aware of what's going on, and you have to gauge what's going on and stay on top of that. I have a lot of additional information on this. If you email me at alex@funeralinnovations.com, send me one of these letters and I'd be happy to send that to you. But we have some info and examples on crafting the right message. So multiple ways beyond what I just showed about how to create the correct message during a sensitive time like we're in right now. 5 ways to help promote your reopening. So remember, we want to reopen, but we don't want to do it in a business-focused mindset. We want to do it in a more consumer-focused mindset. So we have an ebook on how to do that. Feel free to email me about that. We also have new ways to conduct services with social distancing. We covered a few of those today, but if you want more information on that, you can also email me on that. If you're interested in all of that, just send me an email with the letter D. I'd be happy to send that all out to you. But remember, pivot, prevail, and let's respond to all the disruption going on out there. Thank you. I'll handle any questions right now, but I'll hand it back over to Mark to be able to do all that.
Great. Thanks so much, Alex. We do have a few minutes here before the top of the hour, so I do have a couple of questions for you. You talked early on relative to social media. You talked quite a bit about Facebook. Have you found that Facebook is in fact the best platform to use to reach a funeral home's target audience?
For social media, yes. I would say for all digital marketing, probably your website is going to get the most traffic. That's more in the target demographics of what you're going for. But websites are a lot more reactive, right? People are looking for something, you want to provide them that information. When you use something like Facebook, you can be more proactive and get in front of them with the right message. So it's a little bit different use of the platforms and the message that you need to do on them. But I would look at it as reactive versus proactive. Your website's going to get far more traffic than Facebook, and Facebook is still king of social media. And we're seeing some increase in Instagram, but you want to think about your key demographics. Things like TikTok or Snapchat really aren't the places that you should be spending time, money, or effort. You only have a certain amount of energy, and you should spend it where it's best suited.
So you talked about then on the subject of websites, one of the other questions that came up was then how often should you be refreshing the information on your website?
Yeah, I think it's very dependent on one, how you want to be viewed in the community, right? So the more information you have on there, the more modern your website looks, the better you look to the community. I mean, that's a simple fact of it, and the easier it is to navigate as well. And then it's also good for keeping your website up to date for Google. So keeping your search engine optimized as much as you can and keeping your website up to date is going to help with that. In terms of resources, the great part about it is you can start to learn who's actually coming to your website. So using this type of lifetime marketing, getting contact information, you know which people are going to come, and you can start to see if particular resources are getting used more than others. So let's say you have a veteran heavy community, and maybe you didn't even know that, but everyone's coming and downloading a bunch of veterans materials. I would actually go in and provide more information on that. So I would say it's less about what is the timeline to do it and more about how is your community responding and how can you respond to their interests and desires.
Great. Well, Alex McCracken, Funeral Innovations, thanks so much for being with us today. It's great stuff.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.